It's an honor, it's a pleasure. It's great. Today to have here at the school Debra Granik. She's here with us. She's coming to the school and other schools in Israel as a guest text, but as a guest as a project of the American Embassy in Jerusalem. That's the right title?
No, American Embassy in Israel.
Embassy. How should I say it? I want to understand.
You can say the American Embassy in Israel. We never. The issue of Jerusalem is not something we talk about.
Jerusalem is not included. This is political matter. And she will have today not only, and tomorrow not only speak to you, today it will be until 5 o'clock, but also she'll make short, intensive tutorials tomorrow, mostly tomorrow, morning to afternoon, with students from various years, also screenwriting students from the screenwriters track. I think I'm very happy that we're here. We've met, if I may say so, in March in New York. We've had in New York, as most of you know, we've had 3 days of going to the school, 3 major film schools of New York. Debra is a renowned graduate of NYU, a graduate school, Toar Sheni, and since one of the places important as it is was NYU, I asked her directly to see the school's films, which we are going to screen that night at NYU, a month, 5 weeks before, and she was kind enough to watch them. As I understood, she liked them very much, and she presented the school in an evening at NYU with students, professors, etc. And we discussed her potential coming to Israel, and she and his people made it available, made it happen very fast. Thank you in a minute. And I think that Debra is bringing something which is very interesting and very relevant to film students, and I may say to the students of our school. And we asked her today, and Riel is assisting, we asked her today to discuss, to screen, and to discuss her development from being a student in a similar situation of our students, with the lack of resources, in very formative years, in understanding what is cinema, what is right and what is wrong, and how, in a very, and how she did find from a student and then making on the same themes her first feature and then her second feature and her current projects she is working on, and she will be, I believe, very intimate in sharing her thoughts, her ideology, the development of her psyche as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, as someone who is speaking and trying to find her own voice in a very tough world, which is tougher in the States than it is here. Let me tell you, it's tougher in New York than it is in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. This is how I perceive it. There are so many people who want to make movies. There are no public funds. It's a different place. It's a capitalist world. It's relevant to what's happening today in the tents all over the country. It's totally different, better and worse. And Debra represents, I think, one of the leading nowadays cases, if I may say a case, of a woman director, which is rare, and in an independent world, which is not the Hollywood mainstream world, who is striving and fighting, to make her own films and her own voice, and keep her voice and mount her voice. It's So we highly appreciate it. And I think that I just saw Winter's Bone and not the previous films until now. And I personally think that Winter's Bone is the best American picture of the first years. I think so. I can say so, not only because you are now our list. And I would like Shri to present.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shri Kulkarni. I'm from the U.S. Embassy in Israel, and we have an American center here in Jerusalem. I'm not going to get into the question of Jerusalem today, but for those of you who were here for the Dan Gordon program recently, was anybody here for that program? Okay. We try as much as possible to bring really top-level artists and lecturers here, experts to Israel, to try and share American culture with Israeli culture, and the exchange is both ways. But in this case, I would say this program, unless President Obama comes in the near future, this is the most important visitor that I think personally we've had since I've been here in Israel. One of the reasons why this is important to us as an embassy is not just to spread American culture, but also because some of the values that we try to promote throughout the world, not just in Israel, include general American values, civil rights and rights for minorities, and especially women's issues. So we do that with working with NGOs, we do that in the Supreme Court. But I think personally the most powerful way to influence society, influence social consciousness is through the medium of film. Women directors give voice to issues that people may not be aware of. People it may not be at the highest level of social consciousness, and so it was very important for us to bring a outstanding American female director here to Israel, and that's what we're doing all this week. As Renan said, her program is very full. She's going morning to night, trying to talk to as many different aspiring filmmakers in Israel as possible. We've got programs here in Jerusalem, in Cologne, and Tel Aviv. She's talking at Cinemtech. She's talking to a group of outstanding high school students who plan to be here in the future. But the first place that we wanted to stop was Sam Spiegel, and I want to personally thank Renan, because without him, this program wouldn't have been possible. His personal connection to Debra actually allowed us to do this program, so I want to give a personal thank you to your founder and director here. In fact, Sam Spiegel is the only place during this week where Deborah's going to spend 2 whole days. She's here today and tomorrow. The rest of the week, it's lightning whirlwind tour of Israel. So I don't need to give any introduction to Debra. I think all of you have seen at least Winter's Bone, Kala in Hebrew, right? But I just want to tell you that it's a privilege and an honor for the embassy, and we thank Sam Spiegel and especially Debra Granik for being with us this week. Thank you.
חזק ואמץ. Which are the 2 only words that Debra knows.
And I use them every day of my filmmaking life. It's hard to get out there. And I'm really happy to be here, and the introduction, a little bit big. But I think, oh yeah, sorry, okay. It's always rich for me to be able to talk about filmmaking in a dialogue with people who I've not met and who are working from different source material and different stimulations, and so for me it's a big pleasure. And we don't have a concrete format for how to proceed today, so I do want to invite you guys to be very open when you want to go longer on certain subject matter, and the questions need to come from you, because I don't know what's going through your minds in terms of issues you face with your own filmmaking and how they might relate to some of the things that I've thought about or tried to do. And there were a couple things that were more like an agenda, which shorts are the lifeblood of all of us. And so as humbling as it is, and it's not always a comfortable thing to dig up the old shorts, that was really front and center of how to start today, which was to look at 2 shorts that I did during student times, really for purposes of talking about first of all, celebrating shorts, not necessarily these as any kind of special example, but why it's okay to have things go wrong in a short, why they are the ultimate place to learn. And I don't want to cram that down your throat, but I think it's worth getting all fired up and excited about short filmmaking, especially in the protected status of being in an academy. And so we could look at those, and then there is a link of one of the shorts was definitely the nest and the kernel for a feature film. That was the feature that I made really after film school, and it was done in a very low budget way, but the inspiration for it was definitely the short that I'll show. Got some festival recognition and got very positive encouragement from Sundance, which, as you guys know, is a very important benevolent player in the United States. And what Brennan pointed out is true. It's kind of a harsh environment for filmmaking, especially filmmaking that isn't deemed commercial. Its subject matter would not be something that Hollywood would want to fund and distribute. But Sundance, as you guys may have known historically now for 20 years, has been a huge intervention and a huge kind of cultural, I was going to say almost like it's an exception basically. It's an exception. And what they did for years, and they still do, is they looked at shorts that were coming out any given year, and they would then approach the short filmmakers and say, do you want to try expanding that to a longer film? Is the subject matter contained in that short something that interests you enough to explore it in its fullest realm? And if so, we run these workshops, and you can come and it's called a laboratory, and you can come in with the first draft of the feature that's extrapolated from that short, and you can come with this, and we'll wrestle it down with you. You'll try scenes from it, you'll road test it, you'll see where it's working, where it's really not working. And so it's an incredible opportunity. And obviously for years they couldn't do it fast enough, they couldn't do it for enough people. It was always, it's an expensive program to run, all that kind of thing. And luckily things have changed, and they've actually been able to reproduce this program around the world. So it's a happy part of, I think, contemporary filmmaking history, that the idea of independent films being nurtured, and they understand that they have to be nurtured. They don't just, because of the hostility in the greater picture, they don't just emerge without this kind of help. So that was really the reason for starting with a short and then jumping to this feature. So I think we could just launch in.
From the snake fish?
Yeah, I'm thinking that. And then we will do is really just, from that, gauge what the interest is, how to branch out from there. Yeah, the second year of film school, and it was coming out of a set of exercises that we had to do, and I'll get to one special note about this time in a minute, but the exercise was that we had to go to a place or to a person's business or to a family somewhere where we hadn't been before, in a region or a part of the city, and we had to start doing a portrait of someone that we had never met and we knew nothing about their life to begin with, and how to take enough notes photographically that you begin to understand some of the details and issues in a person's life. Either some people could do it with no lines at all, with no dialogue. There were some very beautiful portraits. For example, like a classmate went out to a part of Queens. As you guys may know, New York City is made up of these very large boroughs, and they're really diverse. And Manhattan's the one that sort of has, I guess, it kind of has symbolizes New York, and yet real New York in some ways happens in these major boroughs of Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. So the assignment was to go mostly get your ass out of Manhattan. Don't just stay with the familiar. Stay with something kind of maybe a lifestyle or a path of life that you don't know. And so I was getting back to a classmate went to Astoria in Queens, and that's a very large Greek community. And he went into a Greek barbershop, and just in a couple days of filming, you really learned a lot about this barber. And he said nothing, but it was just the details of how he did his work, the men and women, well, the men in that case, the men that came in, you know, just the rituals of his day. And so it was like sort of a day in the life of a Greek barber in Queens. And my assignment brought me to upstate New York. This is 2 hours north of New York City. And I was trying to do a portrait of what they call an inn, you know, a country inn. I landed there through just chance encounter, and two men ran the inn. And the inn was a Victorian mansion. It was very beautiful. They were renovating it, and it was an extremely arduous project. And this house was like a body. It was like a body of a dead queen, you know, and they had just the drapes. Everything was super fancy, super elaborate, and they were kind of doing it by the seat of their pants. Everything about their life felt a little centric to me. They were taking care of a really old woman in the house. The day that I wanted to film, the woman was being brought out on the stretcher by an ambulance. They were having like marital problems between themselves, and they're like filming, no, you know, get lost or whatever. And I'm like, oh God, you know, I've got my whole crew here from school, and you know, this can't be happening. Murphy's Law, but you know, it wasn't just one of Murphy's Law; it was the whole set of laws of what can go wrong. And there was a housekeeper, a woman that was working there, and that was the woman you see on the screen. Her name is Corinne, and she was working there. She's like, hey, you know, I know I'm not that interesting, but if you want someone to film, I'm here all day, and you can film me if you want. And so we proceeded to film her, and you know, she had some idiosyncrasies. You know, she kept her feather duster in a strange position, and she was very much like a little athlete, the way she ran through the house and did things, and she really wanted to get it done, but I could tell it wasn't an easy job. There were just some things about her that became interesting as the day went on and as we photographed. She said, well, you know, if you want to, you could finish the portrait, you could meet my sons. I've got 2 young sons, and you could come over next weekend. You know, and so I took the bus back up from New York City, and I went back, and it was Easter for her family, and she had made this egg hunt for her children, just like on $2. She was trying to make the day good for her sons. I could just tell there was something burning inside her that wanted to make them have this lyrical day in their childhood. And she had a huge amount of animals in her house. For a person who didn't have a lot of money, you know, she did have the snake, and she explained that the boys had been, you know, wanting a snake as a pet, so she had done that. And so again, all these pieces of her life started to play out. And she said, and you know, this month I'm 1 month sober. You know, I've never been sober before, but this is my first month. And I'm like, oh, you know, so just in a short time I'm seeing these parts of her life, and then she drops this bomb that, you know, in an inside something else is also going on, that she, you know, that she's exploring this kind of difficult path, and that the stakes are very high. You know, it's very hard to be sober the first couple months, very hard to stay sober, very hard to put old habits down. And then she said, "Why don't you meet my boyfriend?" And he came into the picture, and he was, you know, I could see that there was a lot of kind of mess surrounding his life, and he wasn't clean. He was, you know, very long-term heroin addict who was using methadone, which you see in the film, and abusing it, actually. And so she continued to tell me these stories. I'm continuing to collect this video imagery that I bring back to class, little chapters, little vignettes, little pieces. And then it comes time to actually make the film. And so the process was that we would take our video study, and at that time, ancient times, you know, they were still asking us to use 16 millimeters just so we could just learn what it was like, you know, learn all those skills, learn everything, use those lenses, load those magazines, you know, make sure we got those skills down. So I had edited and put together the video, the little clips, the little notes from her family, from her telling me, from her sons, from going to the grocery store with her, from going to her job as a house cleaner, and said that, well, basically it's time to make this film, and this is really what I've studied the most. You know, the last minute you do wish you had gone and met a barber, and you know, there was a lot of things I was like unsure about this story. I was unsure. Fighting dealing with an addiction is a very internal process. It kind of stinks for film. It's a very hard thing to externalize and to make not causal, and so part of me wasn't looking forward to at all dealing with anything to do with chemical dependency or drug use, and yet it was really, really at the core of her story, and so to tell it without it wasn't going to work either. So this was really how this film got put together. Then I went back up with my fellow students, so we all work for each other. I don't know if that's how you guys do it, but it's like 8 crews. So each person is a DP once, each person is a director once, each person records sound once, lighting, okay, so I had my fellow students and we stayed for 5 days, a couple kilometers down the road from this woman, and we filmed these scenes that were specifically chosen. She knew what we were going to film. She knew which scenes we had picked to kind of recreate. And she, very much committed to the project. She had never acted before, of course, and those are her real sons, that's her real house, her real snake, her real boyfriend. And I decided that I would at least try this method. That I had tried actually weeks before. I thought maybe I would try to cast the film, and so I did. I held auditions, and I showed video to some of the people that were auditioning just to get the atmosphere, what her house looked like, so they could imagine this character. And the auditions really were pale. I mean, by the end I was like, I can't imitate her. I can't. And for this project, it would be better, I think, for this project to go to the source and actually have her steer these scenes. And the basic difference would be she would really put her sons to bed. She would really say, get under the covers. She would really do some things from her life, but she understood that it was also, a fictional representation. And it took a willing participant. She had to be willing. And to this day, you never know whether something's going to work. And to this day, it's always hard to evaluate. Should a short even, some shorts, I look at other people's shorts and I say, oh my God, that really worked. And usually what I mean by that is like it really fit the short format. Something about the story was delicious in its shortness. Something about it was complete. And I never really felt this way. I felt like this was always little pieces of a larger life, and I was kind of trying to cram something into 22 minutes. But at that point, I also had to say, it's very important to finish what you start. I had started something. I had started recording, taking these visual notes, getting invested in the story, caring about this family, and I realized, even if the story isn't really what I was kind of learning and came to realize maybe really fits or fulfills a short the best, I was going to go through with this. And so, warts and all, that's what this is. And I was going to say that certain details you can't imagine, given who I am, given my class background, my sort of suburban, urban upbringing, I wouldn't have known if, let's say my assignment was make a film about this mother who's attempting to get clean for the first time and is raising 2 sons at the same time. I wouldn't have really known what to put on a script about what her house looks like. I wouldn't have known that her sons, their favorite pet was a snake. I wouldn't have known that, if as a working class person and you're trying to budget and pay your bills and whatnot, that you also have to, figure in feeding, whether it's $2 or not, it's $2, it's the gas to go get the mouse because the snake will starve, so I wouldn't have known how that life fits together unless I had a life model, unless I had a real person informing me. And it proved to be a method that I could never walk away from after that, that I will always be looking for informants. I came too quickly and too powerfully to know, we only have one life. We're only brought up one way. We're only brought up with usually one social class. You're really only one race, one ethnicity, unless you're lucky to have really diverse parents. And so therefore, we're born onto a pretty narrow path, each one of us. And I found out that my kind of attraction to filmmaking was to ask someone to bring me on their path if they will. And so I'm always looking for a guide or an informant, someone to say, I'm interested enough in this project to go down this path with you. I will share with you observations and details from my life, and hopefully then it's on you to do something with it that doesn't betray me or humiliate me or what, it's like, so there's a little bit of a huge trust factor, but mostly I there are many filmmakers that choose to do things that reflect their own life, and they mine their family for like uncomfortable meals and family celebrations and birthdays that go amok and bad weddings or good weddings or bad bar mitzvahs or good ones, and the humor that is in families, the idiosyncrasies, the incongruities, and that's obviously it's a beautiful art form and path to go. It's so weird. In some ways you don't choose. I feel like I never chose. Whatever brain chemistry I have, it was like find a guide and show you what you don't know, or try to find out some things you don't know. And that's been the path so far. I'd love to open up for questions.
It seems like you run into this the style and your themes by chance, but it's something that you continue throughout your career. It seems like a continuation of Winter's Bone. It's the tattoos, the animals, the meth. It's the same. Is that a choice you made? In what point did you decide this is my cinematic language? This is the themes that interest me. Was it a process that just naturally developed, or was it premeditated?
So did everyone hear the question? Yeah. It's definitely not premeditated, and I think but some things they say literally a filmmaker feels like they never get rid of. It's true. I don't start a film and say, okay, what animals, what part of the zoo can I throw in this film? I never start that way. But when I arrived in Missouri, if she had, 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake, and da-da-da, in Missouri, on this family's property, there were 17 cats, 9 dogs, 4 horses, rabbits, snakes in the wild, a horse, down the road there was a donkey. I didn't say, and my budgets, believe me, it's not like, oh, excuse me, can you bring a donkey? And sometimes I have to be careful, and I have to resist. I have to say, you know what, you have 11 animals in this film. It's okay that unexpectedly this man in church carries a bird in his pocket. Let it go. Even though I could not have known that, and I could not have imagined it. So what I'm trying to say is that for whatever, coincidence exists, there's coincidence plus, of course, attraction. So when I go to someone's home and I see their relationship with a creature from another species, I am immediately intrigued. I want to know why it's so pleasurable and helpful to them to live with a bird or a dog, or it's just something I'll seek out. But it doesn't usually start. It's really organic. At the end of today, I'll show some slides from a project that I'm working on now, just the research photos, and you will see a street in an American city that does not even have 1 tree on it. So I don't know if there's even 1 bird on that street. And I know somewhere in one of those houses there are probably some animals that are important to one of the family's lives, and yet I haven't seen them yet. So it's like, it'll be interesting. Will there be animals in that film? I don't know. It will have to be true. I'm not going to import animals. I'm not going to necessarily, unless it really matters to the story. I'm not against that. If a character needs to, for example, raise money by selling some puppies or something, that'll be right in there. It's not a dogma that I can't import something into a fiction that didn't exist. But my basis of what I'll be most interested will be the real animals, or the real animals that do or do not live on that street. So the question but drug content, that's something that I do get asked, oh God, do you just seek films that have drugs? Is that something you love to tell stories about? And, I've had to think about that long and hard, because I dread it. It's, as I started to say, it's extremely hard. First of all, it's heartbreaking and disturbing. It's not a topic that gives me pleasure to think about, people suffering from the vagaries of addiction and what it brings people through, and yet I can't ignore that it's ubiquitous. Sometimes I just say, why do I live in a country where so many millions of people need to seek chemicals to make themselves feel better? Alcoholism is global. It's I don't know, the first time people knew how to ferment something in a cave, we had people had a relationship with alcohol all around the world that's been problematic. Meth, taking garage chemicals and making these deadly brews, with bath salts, OxyContin, pharmaceuticals. It's like, where does it stop, and why in the heartland, of the United States? Why is this at such a level? And I didn't seek it out, but that story came to me. That was a novel written, and it had this content. And I'm like, at first I'm like, oh God, push the novel away. I was like, I don't have the stomach for it. I can't bear it. And then I'm like, you know what? This is actually a part of this girl's story. This is an American teenage woman who has a dad who has had a very bad brush up with this substance. Her uncle. This is real for the Ozarks. It's real for Maine. It's real for Washington State. It's real for Iowa. So it wasn't that I was attracted to Winter's Bone as a novel because of it. I kind of wanted to do this story in spite of it, but after I say this project that I'll reference later about the city of Baltimore, the story takes place in East Baltimore, drugs factor in a huge way, not taking them. In fact, I think there's no on-screen usage at all, but it is the selling of them. It is the economy of them. It is the selling of small amounts of drugs to pay for your dad's funeral, to pay an electric bill for your grandmother. It is the actual, and it's not sensational, and that's the other thing. I have a couple dogmas, if you will, like for me, on-screen drug taking, it's not meant to be, sensational or pleasurable. I'm not interested in depicting partying, To me, the part of drug taking that ended up being in a lot of stories that I am drawn to was the part of trying to actually leave drugs behind. And what does it take for a human being to put it down? The strength, to me, I call it the Mount Everest of what it means to actually be able to terminate an addiction in your life. And so I always think, oh God, the film's really about what it takes to not do drugs, which is a lot. Like, there's every reason in certain people's lives why I can understand why getting high is extremely sought after, why someone would need that, want it, crave it. And so, it will be a weird destiny. It will be a weird destiny if there is an issue around human use of chemicals in every film I make. I'm leaving it open, but I certainly don't wish it to be true,
What, and your cinematic style, telling the story with this almost documentary approach, showing, little pieces, cutting in the middle of the action, is that also premeditated, or is that just slowly developed because you were kind of documenting this woman before?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One, being low budget has informed my, aesthetic as much as anything else. I am a real believer that to film in real life locations, the size of her house, that's a standard trailer size house. That's a really small set of square meters right there. That's not big space. To get a real film crew, and same thing in Winter's Bone in Missouri, the little girl's house that you see on screen, that's a truly small house. There's no fourth wall, there's no set, nothing comes out, It's not like, oh, let's move the crew back here, well, we'll take out the fourth wall, we'll have lots of room back here, This is crouching, this is, moving to a small space, so it's not that it has to be run and gun, it's not hectic, but it's the smallest footprint possible. That means that I'm never going to be using a huge lighting package. That means that I'll have to deal with fall off, a lot of blackness around I can't light up the woods in Missouri. I'm not bringing condors. I'm not bringing, large gear. So much of my aesthetic is really shaped by small tools, small crew, following the action. I really admire the actual photographic practice of the Dardenne brothers. I feel like they're balletic. They move, they dance with their subjects, they let the action play out. And yet it's not shaky cam. It's not like, trying to say, oh, this got scary. and he ran down the alley, and the camera's running down the alley. You know, it's not, and yet, you know, there's moments where in other people's films, you know, there's a film of Winterbottom that I really appreciate, that the camera was really kind of traveling on some bumpy vehicles and was really going with people. You know, so it's not, again, there's no dogma there. It's more like that. But I don't want the camera to be hectic. I just want it to move quick as hell. You know, I want it to really book, so that I also try not to use extreme marks. So that's where the documentary thing. I would want the focus puller to be someone who works in documentary or can do that work, meaning a great guesser at the, you know, at the distances, not always having time to measure. And in Winter's Bone, I was so blessed. The focus puller was so adept at being able to, we rarely had to stop for him. He literally had that keen sense of where we were at, and so it made it so possible for me to fit, you know, that was 25 days shooting period. Down to the Bone was 22-day shooting period. So these are tight shooting periods, and therefore I have to be able to move. I don't use dolly. I can't donate part of my day to setting up the tracks. You know, I was like, well, but, you know, union, whatever. Yeah, if we want to set these up, you know, I'll help the night before. You know, but I cannot give you 2 hours tomorrow, because that's 2 hours that we don't get to work on the scene. So I have to make these trade-offs that are severe, but it affects, you know. Someday in my life, might I have a jib that brings the camera down and starts a film that way? Maybe. But as of now, I'm like allergic. You know, I'm like, oh my God, you know, China lanterns, China balls. Okay, if you want to float the China ball one time, okay, you know. Kinos, sunlight, available light, you know. So those aesthetics, it's not so preconceived. It's like the aesthetic is dominated not just by the low budget, but also trying to work in existing locations. So yeah, I'm growing, you know, the one thing is that I've worked with the same DP for these projects. And so as I toil, you know, 5 years at a time trying to lay one egg, you know, he's off there shooting now for Stephen Frears. I don't mean to name drop, but you know, he's just like gone around the world right now. He's Scottish by birth, went to NYU, and now he's actually returned to Scotland. So he's actually developed like a bigger bag of tricks. I mean, for him, he's like, wow, Debra, you're gonna keep me like this forever? You know, I mean, I use this, and this, and I'm like, okay, what was their budget? 10 million, 11? Yeah, okay. We've got 2. We've got 1.8. Let's bring it down, you know. And he gets it. So he's always willing to work that way. And for him, it's good. He can get fancy, and it's good for him to always come back to this origins, like, how little can you make a film for? How simply can you make a film? How streamlined can it be technically? I'm just trying to think of anything else. She mentioned the American flag. The one thing, drugs and American flags.
And tattoos also.
Which one?
Tattoos.
Oh, tattoos. Yeah. I know. I kept on the plane coming here. I'm like, wow. I'm familiar. I don't know. I think a lot of Jewish people don't use tattoos. Is that right? Used to be that way. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. I come from Tattoo Nation. You know, I come from Tattoo City. I just filmed extensively at a rock and roll camp for girls. One in Portland on the West Coast, in groovy Portland, and one in New York City. The amount of adult mentors, the young women that are the teachers, the counselors. I mean, you know, photographically, it's a dream world, because it happens to be extremely intense to photograph women with really amazing hair, radical hairstyles, and copious tattoos. It's very graphic. And, you know, tanks that show all their tattoos and some piercings and yeah, so tattoos are a big part of the fabric of contemporary American life as I see it. And I thought maybe I wouldn't see it in the heartland. One of the other slides I'm going to show, I just took a cross-country trip with 4,000 bikers who are also Vietnam veterans. And there's one, I hope I have it, there's one slide where they almost do like a burlesque, and they show their arms. I mean, the poignancy, the American history that is written on these arms, maps of Vietnam, maps of their base camp in under here, where their buddy died, the boots, the armaments they were using, the anger at Jane Fonda. I mean, it's like their bodies are these, tablets. It's literally it's kind of like weirdly, perversely biblical. It's like tablets on human flesh of contemporary American history. And so, again, we know that I come from a complicated place, as you all come from an extremely complicated place. I come from an extremely complicated place. So tattoos, drugs. This is not but with the frequency with which they occur, you don't go looking for it. It comes with the package of the individuals that make up some of the stories and life experiences that I do get interested in. I want to know, what is it like to be you? What is it like for you to turn 60 and for you to still be trying to understand your experience when you came of age at 19 in Vietnam? What is that like? What is it like to be you? But the American flags, a very, very upset person one time at a screening said to me, what's your agenda with the American flags? What are you doing? Why are they in your films? And I said, I have never once added an American flag to anything. I've never added. Have I gone out of my way to include it in the frame? Yes, but I've never added one. They exist. I don't know where the custom comes from. I don't know. I try to go when I'm in France or other places in Europe. I check. France puts its flag out a lot. I check in Germany, Belgium, Italy. Who puts their flag out? A lot. Like, are you ever going to forget which country you were in? I always think I'm not sure why it's so ubiquitous. I don't know sort of the cultural anthropology on that, but they're there, and I just feel it's part of my notes. It's part of my note-taking. On a bad day when I don't understand filmmaking and I feel way too humbled by it and overwhelmed, I'm like, okay, what is a filmmaker? A filmmaker's a scribe. Good, let's go back to an ancient role in society. To feel meaningful, I say, I'm a scribe. I'm supposed to take notes. I live in 2010. I'm supposed to take notes. What East Baltimore looks like in 2010. What upstate New York looks like in 2007. That's my job. I'm supposed to take visual notes and put them in a film. One of the notes is ubiquity of the flags. So I think they're going to be. Even at the rock and roll camp, I couldn't believe it. I have this shot of this woman, this young girl going ballistic on the drums, and she's an awesome drummer. And behind her, because it's in a public high school in Brooklyn, whatever, it's a sunshade, whatever it was using, fading a little glory, I don't know. In this classroom, they had put a flag. So behind her, it's just so crazy that she's going crazy on these drums, and right behind her, flag. I'm like, wow, did I really want a flag in that shot? But it was there. Let me see. I have time on that one. I can always take that one down. That would be the first two that I've taken one down. So I'm like a little bit torn about whether to show because you were saying it worked for you to see the expansion
down to the bone.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. So how's the stamina going? Can you guys sit for a feature?
Could you give like a little bit of an explanation about how you did it, and then we'll show it?
Yes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this film that you saw ended up getting some support, meaning, encouragement. And one of the encouragements was, do you want to try to be in this laboratory and expand this project? Is there a lot more? I'm like, is there a lot more? This is a tiny, tiny little, these are tiny glimpses of this woman's life. Of course, a human life has so much more before it and after it. And so I said, yeah, I would work on that. And after a lot of drafts, there was something that seemed like we could film it. And again, you get very tired of a project and a subject, and the warts of this life are, the really hard parts, the hard parts that you don't look forward to depicting are all in the mix. And again, sometimes the only rule I can then put upon myself is like, you gotta finish what you started. You know, I was scared going into this project. I felt like, you know, in some sense, by working on a script that hard, you almost feel like you're done with the project, that you've thought about it so much, you've seen it in your head so many times. And then what was it going to be like this time, though, to change the actual method of the acting? So at first I knew that I could not actually do a feature with the life model, that she could not sustain the arduousness of a full-blown shoot, and nor would it really work, because there were a lot of ways in which the fiction had to deviate from her life, and that wasn't something she could do. She could do things from her life, and that's where we could work the first time. Second time, I needed an actress that could also do just scenes that were fictionalized for the purpose of a script. And I cast someone who I didn't know, but I liked little bits of her work that I had seen, and she met with me, and it was a very fruitful meeting, and she lived in upstate at the time. She lived in the same area that the life model lived in. So it was a beautiful congruity. Like, she said to me, I know Ulster County, New York. I know that grocery store where she works, you know, where she goes. I'm not afraid of snakes. And I was like, okay, that's all I had to hear. I think you're the woman to do this role. And, you know, it turned out to be extremely great for me as a emerging director, because she wanted so badly to help develop the role. She wanted, you know, it wasn't like, okay, I'll show up at 9 and you tell me what to do. It was the opposite. I will go to this rehab and spend a week there and see what it's like to be in this particular facility. I will go work at the grocery store and figure out what it's like to be a checker. And really, you know, so I had this actress that was willing to do, sometimes people associate that method with the British director Mike Leigh, who frequently has his actors actually do, you know, real life studies, go to a certain job, go to a certain place, and really understand what's going on there to fortify the role. And we did rehearsals and workshops to get the script to work, and the casting, the rest of the casting was done with local people in the area of where the life model and the actress lived. And so again, this is 2 hours north of New York City, and there's, I guess, a couple things just that help context. It's a direct line from New York City, and a little strange aspect of this area is that there are actually a lot of drug rehabilitation centers, and it services a huge amount of people from the New York metropolitan area that are trying to get clean. But also important is that a lot of the rehabs are working class rehabs. They're not like 28 days. It's not Sandra Bullock going to a celebrity rehab. And I was also making this film at a time when rehabs were being like just crammed down people's necks. It's like, oh God, not another rehab film, you know? And publicity and tabloids were filled with imagery of people going in and out of these celebrity rehabs. And for me, it was so eye-opening and so arresting to see a rehab that was completely in service to working people. No glamour, no poshness, no special diets, no cappuccino, no nothing. You know, very, very rudimentary. And that was extremely, that I got reinvested. I was like, this is an important part of the fabric of upstate New York. You know, this will be, and they let us film in the real rehab, which was outstanding. And that's kind of unusual also because rehabs have huge amount of confidentiality, but they found people in the rehab that were willing to actually work with the crew, people that wanted to collaborate and actually be in the film, and that made it special. And so we have a lot of participants from there. So these are some just background notes that maybe help figure out what's on screen. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's kind of relevant from film school short to developing a feature. But maybe I think those thoughts would come much more readily after we screen.
Hi. First, it was the first time for me to watch the film, which I really love. I love Debra in person. She's an amazing actress. And I want to repeat a little bit his question from before and ask, because you mentioned the Dardenne before, and I could not notice that the way the film is being done is very similar. It reminded me a lot of Rosetta for example. The way that you can really feel the character. And I wanted to know if this is some conscious choice that you are making when you think about the film, when you direct, or this is something that comes to you. Because I had the feeling when I watch the Dardennes film, this is their style, yeah? But do you choose it, or that's choosing you, more like?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. I think one thing that came to mind was a comment from this teacher that I referenced that was very influential for me, a Russian teacher who came to the States in the mid-'80s, who's been teaching at NYU for a long time. And something that he pointed out, and he was very strict about this, very adamant about this, was sort of the abuse of the close-up, and all of us thinking that we can sort of buy this intimacy with a character by just like showing a heck of a lot of close-ups, you know, and that he felt extremely critical of American mainstream films just abusing the close-up. Like, how much can you put on a human face before you're just almost numbing someone by showing it too much? And so he's so in favor of making sure that a lot of coverage for the lead is also in medium shots or wide shots, you know, that you're not just always going, even though maybe with an actress like Vera or the actress that was in the second film, Jennifer Lawrence, it's, you know, all the close-up takes are usually very strong. Very, you know, I don't, you know, as a person, I don't get tired of looking at them. The editor doesn't get tired of looking at some of the men and women that are important to the film in close-up. And yet, I really, after film, I kind of began to understand what he meant by that. But I do think that silence, letting the character function and exist sometimes without explaining herself or himself is kind of important for the viewer to be implicated in trying to understand. So I don't think it's, some of it's actually like procedural, you know, like even letting the camera linger after the scene has finished. And there's inevitably, not every time, but inevitably there will be something that can be a gem in editing. The character, you know, can find it hard to keep looking at the other actor, might look down, and that alone is interesting. It might be enigmatic, but it gives something for us to reviewing the performance, something to decipher. And again, contrary to mainstream filmmaking, which would kind of proselytize that people don't want to think, people want to be pushed back into their seat, you know, with a big score, and they don't have to think, and they're told when to think something. You know, this music indicates that you should feel sad or you know, scared for the character. And so one thing I also like is to withhold this indicative score. But it takes a patient, interested viewer who doesn't have an attention span of only 2 seconds to want to say that. You know, often people say, "Oh, you know, God, you've got no music in your film. You know, you've got, you know, or very little. Like, the film was silent practically." And for today's audience, this film that you just watched is virtually considered, you know, it's scoreless film. But I think sitting there, like if a counselor's asking her a difficult question, and you sit there and you wait for her to answer, I think it gives you this chance to experience that it's pretty excruciating, pretty uncomfortable to be asked that in front of a group of people. And you also wonder for 1 second, you know, what's she gonna say? What's she gonna say? And if you plug that up with, you know, with sound and rapid editing at all times, you know, of course there's room for all of that. It's just also leaving space for these prolonged moments of identification with the character. But I think also the actresses, you know, and actors lead you to that as well. And as they're your muse, you know, you and also that's also some great part of a DP's intuition as well.
I talked a little before about working with Debra. I'm just interested in her presence on the screen, the way she grabs the camera. It's just, I mean, in many ways she was carrying the movie on her back, and she's wonderful. And now she's a big star. This was a little bit before she.
Yeah, this was sort of the only feature. This is the first feature where she was a lead, and she had been in smaller roles exactly, and really was hungry for this, and therefore was really also that added to her. It wasn't a lackadaisical thing. It wasn't a oh sure, I'll do this job just like any other one. You know, it was very much like, oh, I really want to understand this character and see where I can go with this, and the fact that the physical places meant something to her. So it was a different Irene. It was a different Irene. You know, I don't know if you could tell that the life model from the first film was in the grocery store, and the man was the counselor at the drug rehab.
Right.
Yeah, that was him clean. It shows what happens when you get attached to a certain family and you make a film with them. You know, this was quite a few years later, and he had been sober for quite a few years, and he always said, you know, the longest, hardest to help junkies also make the best drug counselors, because it's two sides of the same equation. Doing them or not doing them, you know it from the inside out. So at that time that was a little positive thing that had happened in the real life story that was kind of happening as the film was developing. So with Vera, there were a lot of conditions that helped her be in those shoes. You know, it was as cold as it looked. That was an upstate New York State winter with a lot of dirty snow. The fact is, at that time, she did not have children. She has them now, but she did not have children. But she had grown up with siblings who were much younger by a whole generation. She has a brother and sister who, when she was an adult, were 8 and 9, or 7, 8, and 9. You know, and she had a big part in helping raise them. So she actually really knew how to talk to kids. She was very willing to do that in a very wholehearted way, and the kids took a real shine to her. So she, even if they said something different, she knew the scene. She knew in this scene, a mother has to get 2 boys in a costume for this Halloween holiday. So whatever it takes, she's going to put these gloves on him and help him. And so no matter what they do, even if they crawl under the table, she'll say, "Come on out." There's some takes in another scene where they're making those sandwiches. I think one of the boys is under the table, or whatever he's doing, and she didn't stop. Some actors would be very, very particular about that. Whoa, wait a minute, he's supposed to say that to me. And even towards the end, when she's asking this kind of questions to figure out what Bob is really doing, when Bob takes care of you, what happens? But the boy was trying to answer the best he could what he really was thinking, and she would fill in the blanks, and she knew where the scene needed to go, and that's very important. That's very important to me. The way that I don't feel that the scripts that I work from are precious to the word. In fact, I'm always asking actors if they need to make a change, to point it out to me and to tell me, I've learned both ways. It's not good to abandon the script because when you're calm, you've thought about the script a lot, and in production you're not calm, and you don't know you haven't tested something. So sometimes I'll do it both ways. The actor will give me a suggestion, and I'll say, absolutely, let's try it that way, and let's try it also this way. So I love remaining open to what actors suggest. I always feel it's crucial to give them that opportunity. I rarely say no, because I don't think anyone really wants to work with someone who's saying no all the time. And yet, I've got maybe it's indirect, and maybe it's non-confrontative, or maybe it's, sneaky on my part, but no matter what, if I feel like, I need that set also really much more to the point or much shorter, I'll also say, let's do it again, and this time let's just use the second half of the line. Just answer no, don't give any explanation, just no. So we'll do it that way as well. And Vera, very responsive. Never, I really appreciate. Some actors feel like they actually feel like they're helping you. They'll say no to you. Say no. I really feel like it should be done this way. And again, you want the same respect. Like I'll say, okay, good. Let me hear that. Let's do it that way. And I would also like it done, this way. But Vera is not a combative, stubborn person who feels like she knows it all. So very receptive, very generous to other actors. That's another thing I look for. That played out very much with also Jennifer Lawrence in the second film in Winter's Bone. And that means that like the man she was playing against was a non-professional actor. He don't, Bob, yeah. He was from a rock band in Canada. And he'd been in one film, but he was playing himself. He was drawing from very authentic life experience. He'd had a really gnarly and long experience with heroin use, and had been around lots of cycles of rehab and being clean for a lot of years and relapsing, and so much of the story he could identify with, but he was very shy about the actual process and protocol of filming. And Vera was extremely willing to say things a little differently sometimes on a second take to sort of allow him to answer differently and to get nuance from his performance. So, in some ways, she took on a lot of responsibilities for sort of helping him out, which of course is helping me or doing a lot of my work as a director. But it wasn't like stepping on my toes. It was more out of a generous way that she wanted to make him really respond to her, really relate to her, really feel for her, and vice versa. So, that I'm using a lot of positive compliments for this actress because I really feel them, but it sets a standard really high for the kind of actress you'd want to work with or actor in the future. So that's a good thing, though. It's a good thing to have a positive experience because, filmmaking's hard enough to be dealing with, a very demanding person. And the second experience with Winter's Bone, John Hawkes is a very different kind of actor. He was very motivated to do the role. He plays Ree's uncle. Teardrop. Yes. He was very motivated, but had such definitive ideas. It was very hard for me to ask him to do different things. But I would say, sometimes it would come down to like being like, you know what? We've had 4 takes the way you want to do it. I've got to have mine here. It's like, and then I had to talk to him outside of filming and say, going forward, this is how I want to work. I really welcome your suggestions, and for the editing and for the variety, I need to also achieve mine.
Okay.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of energy. I had to be like assertive all the time. And then sometimes I needed people to back me up. The DP one time was very frustrated, and we had to be very direct. We still didn't even succeed because he's very meticulous. Kind of has almost like an OCD approach to like the props. Like he knows, like for me, continuity of a cigarette, it's important. But I cannot lose time. I can't wait sometimes for someone to smoke down a cigarette to match. It's like if people are looking at the actual 2 millimeters difference in cigarette, I'm screwed anyhow. Film isn't working. I'm not trying to ever push aside continuity, and it's truly important and can ruin a scene if you don't have it or if it's glaringly wrong. But that freaked him out. He's used to a lot of television, and it was very hard for him. Like he felt like he wasn't doing his job. He would like, oh wait 1 second, cigarette isn't right. I'm like. In my mind, I'm like, we gotta go. That was hard. And at one point, there was a shot where the DP needed a detail. And he said, oh no, my rifle was right here. And Mike's like, no, I understand that your rifle was there, but I need you to move it just for this close-up. And he's like, well, but the rifle was here. And we didn't, Michael, I guess, moved the camera, just so he could get what he needed, But that's a lot of energy. And it's not because John was trying to be a difficult dude. He's meticulous. He thinks that he's doing the most professional work by being that precise. So just different personality, But I personally, because my films are fluid and there are changes on the day, and I'm not Hitchcock, I need to work more with the flexible and fluid versus the brittle who get broken. That's another mantra, the supple survive and the brittle get broken. But these are definitely very important aspects of the learning curve of making a feature film, because it's a lot of days that you're working with certain actors, especially the actors that are going to carry your film. I've been told that you guys have the stamina to watch another film.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the more recent film. It was shot in southern Missouri. It's called Winter's Bone. And
It's like down to the bone, it's cold to the bone.
okay, all right, that works. And this is an adaptation of a novel by an author who lives in this particular mountain region. This is called the Ozark Mountains, and it's a small mountain range in southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, so it's in the southern part of the country. It's somewhat related to the Appalachian mountain culture, and mountain cultures all over the world and in the United States, as you know, have some distinctions that separate them usually from the mainstream. Certain customs preserve longer, certain dialects preserve longer, certain housing styles preserve longer, just certain cultural differences that stay intact because of separation. You know, obviously once satellite dishes go up and everyone has a cell phone, those things also erode and dissipate. But I think the other kind of interesting thing in your production minds, is that this film was filmed almost entirely on one family's property. So it's all live locations. And the families live in that particular neck of the woods. They live in a piece of land called a holler. And a holler means, open land in which different people in the family have a separate house. Grandmother and grandfather live in one house, aunt and uncle, another family. So it goes little houses in this one. So this one family that we ended up working with let us rent and use as locations the different houses in their one property, and then we used also the surrounding neighbor's property. So it's filmed in a very tight set of locations. And the little girl in the film, you'll see that there's a young sister in the film, and you'll see her in front of her own house. So we were filmed. This little girl lives in real life. She lives in the house that you see on the screen, and many of the things in that world are from her life, her toys, her dog. So we can discuss that much more in depth, but I think it's an interesting context for you. I don't normally say any of this in front of the film, but because you're always clocking production decisions and how things are made. Shot with a red camera. 25 days. A crew of about 45 people. A few from New York, mostly local people in southern Missouri. And I think that's probably enough context to get into the film, and then we can go at it afterwards and talk about it in depth. All right. See you afterwards. I thought in our remaining time, what we could do is definitely take any questions related to Winter's Bone that come into your minds. And then I also had brought some stills from the pre-production of Winter's Bone, because I thought it was kind of interesting to talk about just how we did the research for it, the visual research and location research. And then I brought 2 sets of stills from my newest projects, the projects I'm working on right now, because I thought that could be interesting at the very end to talk about sort of, how this procedure's going and what I'm trying to do, and it could be very relevant to to go back to that feeling of what it's like to start a project. I lost you, feel.
It's a wonderful movie, I say.
Thank you.
I really love it.
What questions do you guys have?
The first 2 movies that we saw, you said that there was a reference model that gave you inspiration, and you based the movie upon his character. What was your reference character in this movie, if there was any? Because you said this is the way he worked now.
For Winter's Bone?
Yeah.
It's from a novel, so there's not I didn't know a life model, and the way that reference approach applies is that the family that we shot on their property, they informed a huge amount of the details of the film. What the house would look like. I mean, they advised on every detail. So in that sense, it's a different way of working with life models, but the life models that we met influenced how the film ended up looking, the details of quite a few scenes, and even dialogue. To be honest, that sometimes I asked one person to sort of be my trusted advisor from that family. The little girl's aunt was someone who I could turn to and say, "Did you believe that?" When she would hear the scenes, I would say, "Really, be honest with me. Was that believable to you? And if not, I would want to know." And she said, "Well, that last line, we wouldn't say that." I said, "Well, how would you say it?" And so at the end of the film, there's additional dialogue credits, like 8 of them, because there were those 8 people locally advised so much on what the actual words would be out of people's mouths, or they said them themselves. So it's a different application of a life model, but all I meant was that I didn't know, as an urban New Yorker, I didn't know what real life, daily life was like in southern Missouri. I had to rely on life models to allow me to photograph their inside of their house, a birthday party, a dinner, feeding the horses, doing the chores, lighting a fire, firing guns, whatever it was. So I don't know if does that answer? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
The environment and the feel of the movie, everything is very gloomy and sad, and like you feel there's a few moments that are a bit happy but not so funny. So how do you manage to not break down from one side, and on the other, don't you feel that you want to put a bit light in this all gloomy environment?
I think that's a very good question. I think, sometimes I see lightness in certain things, or not lightness, but I see hope in certain things. Like I feel whenever I see someone acting strong to survive, that already is like a hopeful thing. It's not a happy, light thing necessarily, but it puts me on the side of hope, versus like a defeatist or nihilistic feeling. I really value humor in everyday life, humor that comes from just the ironies and things, and I want to be able to put more of that in the films I make. And I think, I never try to stop. If something happens, especially children often bring lightness to a film, and children often never do the same thing twice, especially if they're not trained actors. In both films, the children are not trained actors. And so I welcome anything they do. For me, it's weird. Only when you're 6 do you jump on a trampoline with these little horses, and only when you're 6 do you maybe pick those horses as your favorite toy, a pink one and a brown one or whatever it is. There was a scene I cut because it didn't have time, but where she was kind of riding that horse around the house. And it was just so absurd because it took so much effort. It's hard to move that thing around the house, but she was enjoying herself, it seemed to me, So there was some lyrical stuff with the children that I didn't get to include that I think would have increased the lightness, and even though they know that something heavy has descended on their house, even when they jump on those haystacks, to me that was on the side of light, only because they have the ability to have fun, that their light is not extinguished, and in real life, that little girl, loves to invite people to play on the haystacks with her, because it's fun, it's exciting to jump from one to the other and hide, and so, but that point is very well taken, and it's like a life goal to, as the troubles of the world get heavier, who doesn't want to see lyrical moments where there is these sweet, energizing things that make people feel like living, want to live, want to survive, so, I've got my eyes open for that, and I think, in one of the projects I was going to discuss, one of my current projects, I alluded to it earlier about a group of bikers that take this annual trip across the country to honor the memory of Vietnam and the soldiers. And there was so much lyrical material in that, and one of the things that shocked me is that there's also this big love story in it, and it's so unexpected who the characters are. You'll see them for yourself, and so much comedy just comes out of reminds me of actually a film by Jarmusch that I loved just because of the simplicity of humor, which was Down by Law. I didn't love all of it, but an Italian actor, Benigni, he's almost all the humor is just, it's exaggerated. I don't know if I would like it now. I loved it at one point because the humor was just so basic. It was a person with a very strong Italian accent trying to talk to Americans who had never met a foreigner before. And so all the humor was just like misconstruing words, him pronouncing it funny, and over and over, it was like, he wore the humor a little thin perhaps, but so just, sometimes it doesn't take much to actually find something in a person's relationship that kind of literally brings up this feeling, this light feeling in your chest, like, oh my God, who knew that this, burly old guy from Missouri was going to fall in love with a Mexican woman, and they were going to have trouble communicating every night, but they still love each other, There's just that kind of thing that happens, and I want to be very open to that, because it's what keeps people going, me and everyone else.
My personal experience was really intense because of, I can use the word weather in winter bones. And we would like to know about the work process with the photographer, about the colors, about the atmosphere in the movie that really come across by seeing that.
The script, the novel itself called for a huge amount of winter, like real fierce North American winter, which doesn't happen in all parts of the country. And Missouri is one of the states where it can swing. It can go through cycles where some years there isn't a lot of snow. So right before we filmed, I said to the woman, my creative partner who produced the film, I said, we have to take the word snow out of the script. It's confusing everybody. The production designer is wondering if we're going to manufacture snow. We have to do it like a global delete and just remove this word. It can be cold. People's breath can show the cold. The trees will be bare. There may be ice or there may not be. There may be a little bit of snow one morning and it will burn off. So we can't control it. We can't make it continuous. So the look we committed to was, factually, it is winter. Snow will be a gift if we get it, or it won't happen. But either way, we'll keep shooting. And the idea was that we would then exploit some of the things that do make people feel that life is just that much harder in winter, which would be, the trees are bare, so there's not a lusciousness to the landscape. Food is harder to come by. It's harder to heat your house. Just everything in a traditional winter. I think you guys are tropics, right? You don't have winter. Do you have winter?
We can imagine.
Yeah, you can imagine. You've seen it before. So we would just the idea that the DP and I had was that we would exploit that was there, and in terms of for video and film, as you know, gray. Again, you don't have maybe this. You have fierce Mediterranean sun, but gray is a great gift to actual production, for speedy production. That you're not trying to control so much with the sun and the timing of when you shoot and having highlights that burn and overexpose. And so, but we had some sunny days too, but overcast is a big part of winter too. And that was the look we decided. So then afterwards we did have to adjust. When we did have very strong sun, we did have to color correct that so that it would marry well to the rest of the film. And he, as I mentioned, he's Scottish, so he's very familiar with gray skies, and he kind of knows that tone and knows, I think, how to exploit it and work with it. So we did discuss, and then some of the slides I was going to show a few images where, very tantalizing. Right before shooting, they had this ice storm. And it would have been amazing. It's photographically outstanding, but so treacherous that you can't even shoot in it. Our trucks would have gone off the road. It's lethal. You cannot function in an ice storm. And so it always reminds me of some things that you might find beautiful, that a nature photographer can go out and photograph for a great magazine, but you can't have it, as a filmmaker, unless, again, you're going into this other budget range because there's a famous film that was shot where they created an ice storm. They took huge fire hoses and sprayed miles of trees, and then of course it froze and they had an ice storm. So, but the look was not hard to achieve because the environment was giving it to us.
There are many scenes that are hard and harsh. Wanted to know, how do you work with the actors before shooting these scenes, or generally how do you work with your actors?
I mean, there you really have to rely on the actors' techniques for how they are going to approach it and handle it. I think I was very lucky with this scene in the boat that there was sort of an agreement between those actresses. They understood they were going to treat that scene like a fact, a task. That they had a task. It was crucial to get this evidence for her. If anything was going to change, they needed to get the hands as the evidence. And they viewed that as, the actors, instead of viewing it as something that they were supposed to scream at or be disgusted with, instead of feeling like they had to deliver to me a response, they had to approach it this way, as something that they had to do. And the fact is, then you can give things to your actors that will help them. The chainsaw really is heavy. It's heavy to lift. It's heavy to pull the cord, It's uncomfortable to be on a boat, uncomfortable to put your hands in the water. All those things help have that actor be in the moment, really feel what she feels, really respond, and therefore, I wasn't saying to Jennifer, you need to break down and you need to start sobbing and have, she chose how she was going to respond. And when it got, and she obviously would make some kind of image in her head or whatever her technique is. And she said it's hard for her to answer that question. People want to know how actors handle that. And she always says that she feels kind of empty or that she's not delivering a sensational answer because she's like, you got to remember, not all actors live it out. I might have it, it's not that that night I don't rehash and have it like kind of damage my inner core, so I don't know what her technique is, but I kept trying to say to her, it's okay, you don't have to have a method. What I'm seeing is working for me, so I don't need you to amp up anything,
Did you
hit some goal,
Did you do any rehearsals for this scene, or you just...
For this scene, it was hard to do rehearsals because we really were out on the water, and that was hard for the crew. There's some very funny pictures of, they were in waders, they were up to their neck in the water, and it's very hard, like booming and everything. It's not. So that one we didn't. A rehearsal that we did do was for the barn scene, when the women, commit that violence against her and take her to the barn, and we choreographed that. I mean, that was sort of the closest I've come to any other kind of filmmaking. There was actually a man that taught the stunt kicking so that they weren't, obviously harming her, and yet they could exert a lot of force. In their bodies, they could really be pushing her or whatever they needed to do. But with those tips, obviously, it keeps it sane, And yes, we did rehearse that, and all the stuff that happened in the barn, because there were so many players in that scene. That really overwhelmed me. I was very nervous about that scene. It's very hard in one night, to get that kind of coverage. And so it was very helpful to rehearse that. And we rehearsed it dry. We couldn't rehearse it in the space, but still, to make a horseshoe of people and wonder who's going to make their moves and how they're going to, that helped. And then getting to the barn was another adjustment, because that barn was really crowded with real objects.
Can you tell about the music in your films? Because I noticed that only in this film, only one time I heard actual music from the film. It was very moving. And also in the first movie, only one scene when somebody played, and I don't know if you can tell about this.
Well, in both films, there's actually, in this film, there's actually a score. But, of course, it's interesting to me that it didn't, you didn't notice it as, maybe it seems like you did not notice it so much as score. but there's a composer, Dickon Hinchcliffe, who is a British musician. He actually has done a lot of music for Claire Denis films, and he used to play in the band the Tindersticks for years. And he did the score for this, for Winter's Bone. And what he was trying to do, he actually, though he had never seen a banjo before, he actually used some traditional instruments, and he's a fiddler. He did use the instruments extremely minimalistically. And they don't ever sync up with like the actual, they rarely sync up with the actual emotions or actions on the screen. They are more of eerie tones and more of a, I don't want to say subliminal, but they're not really supposed to lead you. It's a bass line. And they certainly do aid, in certain scenes, they aid and abet the tension, no doubt. So in that sense, I'm using the score in a very kind of traditional way. But the on-camera music is probably what you remember the most because it's performed.
I remember the other music, but I was wondering about, you used live music twice in your films, and it was interesting because I felt very like I could breathe again in those scenes. So that's I don't know what is the questions that I'm trying to say, but if you can tell about it, because it was very moving.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, the use of the live music in the second film, you talked about lightness, right? You asked me about lightness. That was a huge light thing for me. As a filmmaker, practicing filmmaking in the United States, I can talk about something good. I was so charmed and excited that I went to a region in the United States where, and there are many, I didn't know how it would play out, but where people really do pick up instruments in everyday life. There are thousands of self-taught musicians who pass along certain traditions of how to play and how to play these traditional instruments, the banjo and the fiddle being some of the most well-known. And at first we said, oh God, there could be no music. There was this very, very famous American film in terms of, it set a tone for a lot of years. It was a film called Deliverance. And it was made 35 years ago. And it was a film that kind of suggested that, mountain people are basically violent hillbillies who, for no good reason, would actually probably kill you. And it's kind of ultra-violent film, but there was a famous riff of music that came out of that film called Dueling Banjos. And it was a maniacal exchange with almost like savant musicians that play this incredible banjo. And some banjo music can get really rapid and really intense, the picking of it. And this song became like what everyone in the United States thought of for a lot of years, except for people that lived in the region. This was the idea, this is like back hills, crazy music, and it signifies like danger. And so we're like, okay, the one thing we can't do for this film, we can't put live music in it. We just can't. That'll just be a horrible reminder of deliverance. We can't do that to the local people. But every time we went scouting there, every visit, someone would say after scouting, would you like to hear some live music tonight? Would you like to come? And inevitably, people would be doing beautiful music making, like in their house, for no greater gain. No one was going to pay them. No one paid a ticket. They were just playing music because it felt good to play music, and because it was sustaining life and it was medicine. And so I said to myself, now it's error by omission. If we make a film in the Ozarks and we put no music in it, that's an error. That's excluding something beautiful in their culture that is alive and well in 2010, 2011. So, and it does have a light feeling. You're right. I mean, it does. Look, if more people, if music could be played most of the time, I mean, that's another hallmark of that region and other locations in the United States. I mean, you go to what they call a pawn shop in the Ozarks, and there are 10,000 guns and 10,000 instruments. There's two things in this pawn shop, and often they're divided. Here's the armaments, the firearms section, and here's the music section. And I'm like, this is my country. Hello, this is my country. But I love. I mean, obviously, the music is so crucial and so important and so promotes functional living and I can't say enough. And I enjoy watching people perform live music. Photographically, I like it. That's why I was in heaven at this rock and roll camp for girls. Just seeing the amount of, and just seeing very small people, with very large electric guitars. Just some of the irony. I mean, it's just the visual intensity of music making and people bopping and having that rhythm in their body, getting into it. So all of that.
Especially the singer.
Yes.
And
she went on to make the soundtrack with the other actors, and then they went on tour. She'd just been waiting all her life to sing. I mean, she'd been singing all her life, but she'd been waiting, sort of to do something with it. And so that was a really sweet side aspect of this project. That was the only thing that we could ever give back to the region. Like, there are these tax incentives in certain regions. If you come and film in our region, we can reduce the amount of we can give you a rebate on what you spend in the region. It's very helpful for financing films. And after we made this film, we felt so guilty because the Missouri, I mean, they supported the film. They were very pleased with it. It employed a lot of Missouri actors, a lot of Missouri film personnel. But we were like, this is not a good promotion of tourism for the Ozarks. Have we wronged you? And luckily the music came out really strong and people really embraced it and they got a lot of play. And I think the word is out that it's a very special cultural heritage of this region, and at the very least people should come to a music festival in the Ozarks, at the very least. But yes, I don't know. I think that's a big pleasure. So I hopefully it'll always fit so that I can indulge myself, honestly, with on-screen performance of music. And I'll say that also my the mentor that I keep referencing, Boris, he had always said he showed a lot of films from Eastern Europe where people sing, either just their naked voice, and he just said it's a very revealing human behavior. To watch another human sing is often mesmerizing, and you see, and then to match how you experience their voice with who they are. So he just said often you'll get a lot of bang for your shekel, by including something like that. Maybe I'll flip to the slides because we can just look at sort of raw imagery that went into why we got involved with this region, what you asked about, the color palette of the DP, and sort of how he started to formulate these ideas, and what I was looking for, and then how the life models sort of got into this, started to inform the actual details. So
the other one?
The first one would be, that one, exactly. So when we got down there, we realized the houses had so much texture, and the DP was getting extremely excited. He's like, this is a lot of texture for me to film. This is a lot of detail. We can go next one. Earlier we talked about the animals. Every house came with its animals. Next, yeah. And then, of course, there's these poignant incongruity things, again, the yards were filled with texture. Many houses didn't have the same materials. This house has this wood, the corrugated metal. You see what I'm saying immediately, right? This is not a flat surface. This is dream for a lens. Yeah, well, the flag was there. Right? I would love to have a goose walk through my frame. And there were geese and everybody came to check us out, all the different four-legged creatures and two-legged creatures. This is an example of a holler. So once we got down there, someone volunteered who read the project and said he would help us. He said, look, I don't know you, I don't know if I can trust you, but let's work together for 1 week. And I'll see what you're really up to, what you really want to do, and then I'll present it to my friends and neighbors. And for example, he would show us family properties that we could tell already. There was, again, in the landscape, there was this very rich depth of field. The hills and hollers were going to be a good terrain for the filming. Okay, next. This is a series of yard. This ended up being Megan's yard with the younger woman that brings her to the next house. You'll recognize some of the house. Next, yeah. And there was an interesting thing. It's easy to make a judgment about this house, and it's easy for an American to make a judgment about this house. And there are a lot of ugly words that can describe this yard. And what one thing I learned about this film is ultimately, it's easy to think that you know who lives in this house, and you say, why do they have all this junk? And then you find out that it's an older man who's really this gentle person, and he keeps the junk because he likes to be able to give a windshield to someone who needs it. He believes that if he keeps the stuff, he can always give something that someone needs. A door, whatever it is in his yard. Someone needs a new house, he'll give them this trailer. So it's interesting. And then there was lonely and desolate parts of the landscape that we knew. Also, texture. That's when I found out the girl loved the trampoline. That was her real toy. This is part of the backyard of her house. Texture. It's interesting that the production department thought I wanted these off. And the day before filming, they took all the plastic. I came back, I said, where's the plastic? Luckily I wasn't a jerk about it. I just said, crazy as it seems, oh my God, I always knew, I thought we need the plastic. So, because it's so real about how to keep the house warm. Just unexpected. Look at the texture of the stairs. This is stuff that an art department can't buy and can't imitate. This is to me, it was important that these houses had real lives. People really walked on those stairs. All right, so I think we're back. Yeah, that's great. And then we'll do one more. Let's do. We could do. I'll do the Ice and Dusk just because you guys asked about that a little bit. This kind of tree is not common to where I live. It's not as common, this walnut tree, and it's so dramatic because the branches go every which way. I felt like these trees were like almost emotional, and this is the example of how the ice had gotten. It was so incredible, it's common for the area, but as I said, we couldn't use it. But it stimulated us. I must say these trips. And then we were prepared. We said, if we do get this ice, of course we'll photograph the hell out of it. But, but it's good. It's good to get you and the DP excited. These trips and taking the photographs mean everything to the pre-production. Next, and this is just how the trees look when they get big. And then we noticed. Wait, would you mind stopping on that other? Go back to that. Yeah. Sorry. Let's see. It was the dusk one. This one, yeah. Just we started. This is just taken from a moving car. This is not a. But we were just starting to study. What does dusk look like there? Just that sometimes a certain landscape just looks spooky just by itself. Just wondering, where the next house is, where you're going to go. So we realized that there was going to be a lot of mood. All right, good. I think, there's, all right, we'll do Fox Family quickly. All right, that's good. This is short. This was a family, we ended up filming in their house. The music scene is filmed in this next part of their house. But again, just there's just for every member of this family, there was one of these dogs. And, there was just it was so clear to me that the dogs meant a huge amount to the family, and that it would not be hard, it would not be false or stretched to, have this be a part of the film. And then when we got to the other property, we realized that there really were a similar amount of dogs. So that's where the idea that the families were authentically, even if they found it hard to feed everybody, they were really committed to having these companions. And that's where we scouted this house, and we said, this is so great to have this depth, that the way the house was designed. So this is one of the locations we wanted early on to lock in. We said to this family, this house works really well photographically. Would you be open to having us film the scene here? And that's where, so in this room where she's standing is where that scene takes place. So that's just the evidence of what it's like to go around an area where you're going to film and start getting real life locations, and then having, there was very little change in this house. That was just unexpected, I don't know, there was something about, I didn't know that teenager would wear those bracelets with those sneakers, but I had to see it for myself. So just sometimes you just take notes. Boy and his grandmother, and then he's with his grandfather, and again, the music thing was a big part of his family. And there was just such peace in his family, and I just realized that I was inspired for the casting by meeting families such as that, and then going back to them and asking, would you be in the film, even though they've never been acting before. All right, let's pop to do you want to stay? The next project that I am working on is in Missouri, or do you want to go to a totally different region of the United States? There's a choice between going cross country with the bikers right now, or going to East Baltimore.
The bikers.
Okay. All right, so that would be RFTW. One that says. Great. Okay. Question? It's not part of the research. It's a reason why some of us are behind the camera. So this set of images is from a documentary that I've been working on for the last year, and I have a lot of doubts that sometimes I just want to make it a fiction, and so this is in southern Missouri, and this man closest to us in the front of the screen is the man that played in the barn. His name is Ron, but he goes by the name of Stray Dog. And we met him in the making of, he was someone we met in what they called a biker's church, a church for people who ride motorcycles. And he ended up being a very complex person who had a lot of thoughts about what it's been like to be alive for the last 50 years and 60 years and growing up as a poor white person in the United States. And he just became like a real guide. And we said, yeah, we'd like to take this trip with you. I just really loved this woman braiding her boyfriend's hair, this is an iconic hillbilly. This man self-reports and self-describes himself. He says, I am a hillbilly, look at me, I am a hillbilly. I have the beard, I have the hair. I live in a hillbilly lifestyle. But they really open up that word and make sure that you understand all the positive attributes of hillbilly tradition. Next. This was a biker's convocation, and I was just loving the lighting. I love, obviously Magic Hour is so hard, and it's a terrorizing thing for production. It's ephemeral, but I have learned to just love, even much wider than the minute any dusk exists, and seeing, this extremely gorgeous thing of a still available light, and then the lights illuminated, the lights of any of the cities of your country, unexpected things, going into the grocery store with a small rabbit and a Band-Aid. That's Stray Dog. Stray Dog was,
his jacket,
yeah, that's his jacket. That's the jacket that means a lot to him. Next, this is Memorial Day. This is when people are acknowledging all fallen, all soldiers from all times. And these are people that would be acknowledging soldiers from World War II. This was his relative's house. Again, you say to an art department, people try to imagine what other people's kitchens are. And, if I was going to shoot a scene, I would ask, can we shoot in this kitchen? If this was the character that I was trying to portray.
Okay. There's a welcome carpet in the entrance.
Yeah.
The refrigerator is fine.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a shot of 3 of them, I think, coming up. 3, yeah. I like the triple welcome. I think she had 4 more on the side. Yeah, and then she had a doll collection. She had a lot of idiosyncrasies. These are things I could not invent. I could not sit in my apartment in New York and write interior, house day. Crocheted dolls are in the bathtub, The doll meant a lot to her. She had picked this one up at a doll hospital. And, again, this is icons, but the way it's arranged is unusual. Again, maybe everyone would put the, standing up or whatever, but just very specific to who she is. So we start the tour of going cross country. This is a small town in the state of Missouri. And just the texture of that store, what this woman had done inside her store, very, very specific. But again, stuff I cannot imagine, stuff that gives the camera so much to look at. This is, to me, it's like an installation. I mean, it was very, the way she did her store. He goes to his family reunion, and he sees a lot of his grandchildren for the first time. He greets his brother. That's his cousin. He brings the watermelon. Those are his nephews. This is, I don't know, I thought they were so beautiful. I just died when I saw these two people. And I said, she reminds me of Tilda Swinton, but they were just so who they were. That was so real for them to show up at the family reunion, and just how hard it is to form an identity, to figure out what you want to look like and how to represent. I felt like they were so deep in that process with his relatives. And again, just I don't know, it was sort of like the anthropology of beards and mustaches. This was an interesting waitress, because she speaks with a voice box. That the necklace is actually, she pushes it to take your order because of the, when you have an operation on your larynx. And again, not to make anything so special, but it was just so interesting. It was just so there. It was in everyday life. And I thought, hey, I haven't seen that before. That would be interesting. An attractive waitress, but just with this unusual detail. This is his son. This is he has one adopted daughter who's Korean, and they were taking care of these small kittens, feeding them the milk. So, just again, I didn't expect when he had this big, in-depth conversation with his granddaughter that there were going to be kittens, tiny little kittens, going in and out of the frame. And I didn't expect that he would even care about them, but he anything that can be fed, he likes to feed. That's him marrying a Korean woman. Now we're at the next town, and the townspeople are welcoming the Vietnam veterans, and they're going to come on their bikes. Just details of clothing. The bikers arrive. Just the details of their clothes, the ornaments of their bikes. This one, I was just like, what does it mean to film 100 people waiting in a food line in leather? Or 1,000 people? It's just graphically strong. And I found that there was a huge amount to look at visually. Then four of the men became special friends and decided to ride together, and they had a lot of camaraderie, and they shared a lot of moments together. And that was kind of sweet. Alicia from Mexico, this is Alicia here, many people ride with these masks so that they don't get super sunburn and windburn from the riding on the highways. But it becomes a little surreal. Yep. That's them kissing with the mask on. Again, that's kind of surreal. I just had to pinch myself. Okay, I'm in front of a large pizza sign, and people are kissing with a weird mask. And can I do better than this? I don't know. Can I have more joy right now? Talk about lightness, And this couple was just giving me a lot of joy. Yeah, really serious sunburn happens. some chips and salsa. Sometimes she feeds him from the back of the bicycle while they're driving. Again, this was a happy American image for me. This is really, really happy. This made me really happy. Like, I like this black man and this white man being friends. I loved it, actually. And like, you look at them and you're not sure they would be friends, but they're really like close friends. And I don't know, it makes me happy. It just, anything unexpected that can go right is cause for celebration. This was awkward landscape, awkward, devastating American landscape.
Yeah, we got everything.
Just like, first of all, the aspect ratio you notice is like unfriendly. Like, why have the signs gotten so tall? And how big can the flag be? But this, and just the barrenness, just the weird cement nowhereness of this image is just so common throughout the heartland and many places. And this was the very intense rituals. This is a ritual to have 1,000 people fill up their motorcycles with gasoline. Numbers are flashed, where to go, what pump to go to. And then there's 1,000 people trying to talk about oil addiction and gasoline addiction, just to see, 1,000 motorcycles sucking the end of a gas pipe was already something. This was the tattoo. This is the American history on the skin demonstration. This is a very poor public school in Virginia where they stop and the bikers give the school $12,000 when they come through. They give them a gift. They raise this money like dollar by dollar and then they present it to the school. It's very touching. And this is sort of, I don't know, this is the timeline of the really, the poignant timeline of what's been happening. The gear, again, graphically intense, super graphically intense. Facial hair. That's the ending image. Our tired American hero in his little buggy.
With the flag.
Oh, sorry. And this is back home. This is the house they live in, Alicia and Stray Dog. And I just put that there just so you could get the context. I didn't know I would have brought. I have lots of moving image. I can maybe send it along because you guys might enjoy it. Just a little sample of the actual film. I didn't know I could play it here, but now I found out you guys can watch it, no problem. All right, we can go to the next. I think that's the last one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want the third CD?
Yeah. But again, not to be silly, but I'm just saying that kind of facial hair, a camera. I don't understand why we don't have more beards in films. I guess the Hasids would take the prize, but I guess Hasids and hillbillies, man, and Taliban. I guess there's a lot of people that rock beards in the world, but they are photogenic. They have a lot of depth of field, a lot of texture, so it's hard not to want to put them in. So now we're in East Baltimore, and some of you may know about East Baltimore from the show The Wire. Recently, a woman that was on that show approached us about making a film that deals a little bit more sort of with her life. She was the character on the film in The Wire, and she invited us 2 weeks ago to the block party in her neighborhood. And when we got down there, she said, "Why don't you photograph and take some notes and see if this, matches up to your ideas? And what would you show? What would you show from this block party?" And I said, "Well, you show us. I don't know what your block party's like. You tell me what's good about your block party." And we went, and so these are some images from the block party. As you well know, if anyone watched The Wire, that there are a lot of abandoned houses in between the houses where people are still living, which is, I think still, it's pretty disturbing to see that. Texture, again, not a rural setting, but this metal. I don't know, I feel like you guys have a lot of texture here.
Oh.
Even just getting into the Sam Spiegel Film School in this industrial park. I mean, you guys, I don't know, a lot of what I saw this morning, Tel Aviv, a lot of cement that's in distress, a lot of rubble. So the barbecue is about to begin. This is going to be like a beautiful ritual of making meat in a very specific way, but a lot of these barbecues were handmade, which was special. So it's just like this ritual. Pull out the barbecue gear. Fire up the barbecues. It's getting very exciting. Know how to work the barbecues. Build a stage. Build a stage for the performers. Special ventilation pans for a hot day. Special detail. Couldn't have known about it unless the guy wore it himself. Just the rust on that truck astounded me. I was like, God, that's just already its own color palette. And stage got built, process. That's another thing that my mentor would just stress to the point where he would just be screaming in his incredibly strong Russian accent. Just process. And everyone was like, what does he mean? What does he mean? Like, it is intrinsically interesting to show how something gets built or made. There's a reason why it was completely mesmerizing for people to see films set in factories. It is interesting to see how things get built or made. And so it proved to be true with the stage. Inside the house, one of the very loyal members of the block is going to prepare a special sauce for the meat. I thought the lighting was exquisite in her kitchen. This is considered a really hardcore American ghetto. This is a hard place to live. Her house has probably not been renovated since 1941. Some of the electric, also many people living in a very, very small space. Again, I was loving the lighting. I was loving the layers and textures, the depth of field in her room. Her choice of painting. I would say to an art department person, don't touch that room. It is so beautiful the way it is. Do not touch it. Her name is Frankie. This is Frankie's room. This is how Frankie set it up. This is the effort. This is buying the bread for the block party. Details of her house. You can see this is the width of the house. I don't know if you can understand that that's actually the door. There's nothing else. That is the size of it. And then there's the door. Little surrealistic moment there. The raising of this. So this is the street I promised you. I mean, there's a tree way back behind that house, but this is the street. Yeah. And it was, an attempt to make it interesting for the children, to make this inflatable children's toy. I was loving the color and the texture of this. I was thinking, my God, it almost looks like it was painted for the film somehow. This touched me that this family was so into this that they brought out, and they're going to bring out their table in a minute. This is like a classic American portrait, I think. It was like a hot day. It was 100, let's see, what was Celsius? It was 34. Right, that's hot, right? No, 35?
Normal. We had 40.
All right, so it's like here, okay? It's real hot. And then you grill, and it's even hotter, right? And it's very common, this is a common tradition to keep cool, is to put a wet, cold washcloth on your head.
Wow.
That's Frankie out in the street.
Good picture.
The DJ. Fathers and daughters performing on stage. Getting cool. The texture, this was really textural. I mean, just to see the skin get really wet. And, just the poignancy of there is a poignancy. People are trying to survive. But it feels really good to have that cold water on your skin. Another dedicated chef. People really appreciating the food. Just the crowd, again, I really appreciated when the frame got full. Another tip from the mentor. Full frames are very rich. It's very, very rich to see 6 people in a frame.
Wow.
Those are curlers, getting the hair ready for the performance. Again, the primus, just the specialness of getting wet when there's just no shade and no trees. Not to mention that wet pavement, as you know, is ridiculously photogenic. Pro camera. The next big feat was to actually make the pool for the children, a bigger pool, so that more children could get in. Borrowing some water from the fire department, using the hose, filling it with brown water, making a mini Ganges for the children. Again, I was loving the texture of this kind of performance in front of the buildings, in front of the houses. It was just kind of unexpected. She danced for 4 hours with her cane. So I just even like that, like ferocious dancing with a cane. This is just stop it. This was interesting. This is not the way I normally make films, but it caught my eye. Many people are very intentional with what colors they put in the frame. Like they might say, okay, for this block party, there will be no red. There will be no matter what, there will be no red. And then I realized, well, the fact is, you could go the other way, and you could show, that although it's quite gray and beige, and that many people choose to wear red, or there's just many ways, but certain colors, obviously, if it's red is the only color that pops, that's already becoming quite a deliberate choice. I don't usually work that way, but I'm intrigued by it, and I know many other filmmakers do. But this one caught my eye because I was like, well, there was red represented. This woman really took my interest. She's a cop who has a very long-term relationship with people on the block. She's Italian-American, working-class woman who gets along really, really well. People really love her on the block. And this was unexpected. After seeing The Wire, and after seeing so many American police shows with bad cops and tough cops, it was really interesting to see a really, really good cop. The life model that we're following is the woman on the left. She played the character of Snoop in The Wire. And she's quite androgynous, but it was a big surprise to see a really emotional side of her, greeting and hugging and being with a lot of people that she knew on the block. Yeah. So this is my current tear book for the project I want to make in Baltimore, and I just was really leaving this as a final note of a practice that I enjoy, and I would assume maybe or guess that a lot of you also love to photograph the subject matters that you're going to film. But it's a really wonderful, wonderful collaboration with you and the DP and other people on your film team to ask everybody to start collecting images and involve them and show them the ones that meant the most to you. But really why I show this is just because it is part of the way these are the details. So when I make a scene now, it will have a lot of the, hopefully, God willing, it will have a lot of the details from that real block party. And I will hopefully be able to ask the people that know how to make this block party to create the scene with me. and use the music and the dancing and the details. And so sometimes they may not all be on screen, but they've informed what the scene looks like. All right, I think this is the end. I mean, unless there's any questions. Thank you guys. I look forward to seeing your films and these excellent Sam Spiegel compilation, amazing output. And yes, thank you. You guys have a lot of patience, a lot of stamina, as I would expect from people at a rigorous film academy. I won't endeavor. You're